ಧನ್ಯವಾದ.
Your phone? I think I have until 6:30. I'll try to make the most of it. Namaste. Thank you very much for turning in such huge numbers on a Saturday. And on the way, I was just saying this, and I'm not saying this for the public consumption, that the cultural capital, obviously, of the state has to be Pune for multiple reasons. And each time I've come here, regardless of the topic, the turnout has been fantastic. Bangalore, in that sense, is equally great. So I think somehow the renaissance of this particular country, or the civilization, is starting from the south of Indias for all practical purposes. It is believed that Manu came from the south of Indias, the much reviled Manu. I was wondering how to structure this session. So let me try and start with something. So the second book, and I'm not trying to sell the second book yet, the release is only on the 23rd of August, but there is something during the course of the writing of the second book that I realized. So Brihadaranyaka Upanishad has a particular quote which effectively speaks of the place of the Chaturvarnas within the Hindu fold or the Dharmic fold. It starts off by extolling the Kshatriya. And this is in the context of the Rajasuya Yajna. Effectively saying that it's the Kshatriya sword that enables the flourishing of dharma. Because under him we are safe. As long as that sword is unsheathed, you're safe. But the person who ultimately eggs and encourages the Kshatriya to live by dharma and to conduct that sacrifice is the Brahmana. And although the Kshatriya is the Yajamar of that particular sacrifice, he is doing so at the behest of the Brahmana. So anyone who strikes the Brahmana, and in that sense it refers to a particular class of enlightened individuals, not in the manner in which it is understood today. And if it provokes certain sentiments, so be it. This is my position. So, as far as the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is concerned, I could have quoted the Manusmriti, but because Manusmriti is reviled, I decided to switch the Upanishads. Because this is what the Upanishads say. That ultimately someone who strikes the Brahmana is bound to be punished and he will be reduced to the condition of Daridrya. Now then it goes on to say how the cosmos was created. That the supreme consciousness Brahman effectively created, so there was a loud bang of sorts and then emerged the universe. To protect the universe, the Kshatriya was created, and then to give him the concept of dharma, the Brahmana was created, but then the universe, or let's say the supreme consciousness, still felt that kuch missing hai is equation mein. Now, as far as the Kshatriyas are concerned, who are the Kshatriyas according to this verse? Indra, Varuna, all these elements, all these deities. And then they realize that घर तो चलाना है, कैसे चलाएंगे? पैसा तो चाहिए. So, the Vaishyas among the gods were created. But then ultimately someone has to feed and nourish all these people, and who has to bear the responsibility of the society and to say, I'm here. You know which community was created after that? Utter the word. It's not wrong. Shudras. Don't be scared of it. The SC/ST Atrocities Act cannot come in the way. As a lawyer, I'm saying this. 100%. The word is Shudra. It is not a cuss word. It's an extremely proud word. Don't be afraid of it. It's on free speech, right? I'm exercising my free speech. And you know what is the position of earth in this verse? So the Shudra that is created for the nourishment of all the castes is Bhumi, which is called Pushana. From there comes the word Poshana and Poshit. Earth is treated as Shudra in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Now please tell me, which person in his right mind can attribute cheap qualities to the Shudra? I'm sorry, this is the position of the Vedas. The Manusmriti could not be treated as higher than the Vedas. And therefore, if at all the Manusmriti says something, it has to be consistent with the Vedas. Because Smritis are meant to be realistic and, let's call it real-time expositions of the Vedas. So embrace this cactus. Because those who wish to exercise free speech cannot do so without the guts to embrace the truth. Period. Because if free speech is meant to be just comfortable speech, then I don't understand why do you need that speech in the first place. Who are you going to trouble? You're not going to trouble anyone. The reason that you need to protect free speech is to protect you from anybody's offended sentiments. Because he cannot cite his bloated ego or his sentiments as a reason to shut you up. That's the reason it needs to be protected. Now, but then, after having created all these varnas, not caste, don't use the word caste, varna. After having created all the varnas, then Brahma asks himself, how do I ensure that all of them operate within a certain boundary? What if the Kshatriya chooses to become a tyrant because he is the one wielding the sword? What do you do then? Well, let me create an honor code, and that code is called Dharma. So the verse ends by saying that all of these people are kept in check by Dharma. Now, why is it Dharma? What is the etymology of Dharma? That which sustains is Dharma. Dharayati. That which sustains. So what does it sustain? It sustains what we believe is cosmic order as reflected in societal order. Period. Now, why is this important? It makes absolutely no sense to discuss either free speech or any other form of right independent of the end goal. A direction is meant towards a particular destination. So what is the destination that you are aiming for? What is it that the society is geared for? From there, you discuss the nitty-gritties and the nuts and bolts of free speech and expression. That would mean, in the context of present-day Bharat, I would ask myself, how do I determine the metes and bounds or the Lakshman Rekha of free speech, if at all there exists something? I am a free speech absolutist, but not in the sense as Dr. Ranganathan, in a slightly different sense. One, I would want to be very, very clear about what is it that the free speech must protect. And I would want the metes and bounds of that free speech to be etched in the context of Bharat's peculiar historical experience. Which means equality, if applied blindly and mechanically in the context of Bharat, will result to the detriment and will lead to the detriment of the native faith systems. Because there can be no equality between the butcher and the goat. There can be no equality between the predator and the prey. Now, therefore, the provocative question that arises out of this position is, are you therefore propounding unequal rights for religious minorities? That would be the question. Now, let's unpack this a bit more. And therefore, the question would be, how does one define a minority? Why do you need the concept of a minority? Should you choose to subscribe to the definition and the concept of minority, by definition, you are giving the rest of the state a particular religious identity or a national character. To say that because there is a majority, there is a minority. In which case, at the very least, have some shame and admit the Hindu nature of the society. Because you cannot ask for a treatment of minority as a minority while simultaneously denying the Hindu character of the society and the civilization. That can't work. Because then effectively you are asking for the cake and eating it too. You are saying, I will speak from both sides of the mouth and both are equally valid, which cannot happen. Why is this important? If today the position is that these are values which are universal, these are values that have been universalized, the concept of a national minority has come from Europe to protect national religious minorities. In the context of Christian states and in the context of states which are predominantly Christian and which have non-Christian populations. And therefore, those states have the luxury of proclaiming and chest thumping the fact that they are indeed a Christian state. Nobody denies that character. And then they speak of how do we treat non-national minorities or non-national religious groups in this country. You want to adopt that particular framework and that particular paradigm as far as Bharat is concerned, and still want to say Bharat cannot have an identity of its own because that goes against its own definition and subscription to secularism. So should you want to discuss free speech and minorityism, it starts with the basic premise, which is what is the identity or the pehchan of this Rashtra? Start with that question first. Everything else is a secondary discussion. Because then मूल्यों की जो परिभाषा है या फिर उसका जो विश्लेषण है वो अमूर्त नहीं हो सकता है. It can never be in vacuum. It has to be in a context. Values must always be discussed in the context. So in the context of Bharat, it has to be defined by whose house is this, what is the position of others, and how do you draw the boundaries and how do you build fences, period. Start with that. Then let's go to the second question. The common belief appears to be that as far as Hindus are concerned or Dharmiks or Sanatanis are concerned, we don't subscribe to the concept of blasphemy. Proof. Give me citation. Give me a precedent. What is this based on? What is the source? Is it our wishful thinking or do we know what we are talking about? What is the basis of this position? Sorry? Bhagavad Gita says what? The existence of a dialogue in a particular document is no proof of the fact that blasphemy is not subscribed to. Please, let's not confuse. दो लोग संवाद कर रहे हैं इसका मतलब ये नहीं है that blasphemy as a concept is not subscribed to. They are willing to engage in a dialogue and therefore there is no need for blasphemy as a concept there. Blasphemy as a concept becomes relevant when you and I have fundamental disagreements. Now, गांधी wanted to basically say भैया देखो प्रार्थना के तरीके में ही अंतर है. प्रार्थना के तरीके में अंतर नहीं है. प्रार्थना is superficial. सोच में अंतर है. Two-nation theory is not the product of difference in mode of worship, but it is a product of a fundamental distinction in your approach to the supreme consciousness. So when you try and reduce that fundamental philosophical, metaphysical, spiritual distinction to a mode of worship, I must ask you, बच्चे तुम किस स्कूल में पढ़ते हो और कौन से क्लास में पढ़ते हो? Two-nation theory did not arise because he chooses to do a sajda whereas you choose to do a namaste. No. It is because of the thought behind it. Now, in which case, if blasphemy is fundamentally a consequence of two people having such clear distinctions, how do you define the metes and bounds? Now, there are sources, as far as Hindu scripture is concerned, which can get as authentic as possible, where there are injunctions for three things: Go, Brahmana, and Devaninda. The killer of the cow. So Go Hatya, Brahma Hatya, and Devaninda. All three have severe consequences. Severe consequences. And I'm putting this to challenge. Confront me with an opposite source. And I'll give you the source from Atharva Veda. Maharaja Ranjit Singh, with the sword which had Shakti in it, went looking for killers of cows and butchered them. तो हम गो की रक्षा करेंगे लेकिन देवों को छोड़ देंगे? How does this even work? You'll protect the cow but not your devas and devatas. ये कैसा tolerance है? Revisit your notions of tolerance. Revisit the need for tolerance. revisit the necessity for tolerance, and don't put yourself in a spot and tie yourself into such knots that you'll find it difficult to get out of the particular position when push comes to shove. And don't put yourself in this position merely because you want to show that you're better than the other guy. Why would you want to prove yourself to a brute who detests your existence? What audience are you catering to? And why do you need to cater to this audience? So the question would be, what has been our traditional position? Why don't we take a look at the injunctions? एक मिनट मनुस्मृति को छोड़ दो भाई, ठीक है, उसको छूते ही लोगों को तकलीफ होती है, छोड़ दो. अर्थशास्त्र क्या कहता है? When it comes to treatment of these people, or let's say blasphemers, why don't we read that? Surely Chanakya did not invent stuff. He was drawing from some source. What is that source? Now this would take us to a very, very sensitive territory. So are you therefore saying that your recrafting of Bharat as a civilizational state would mean that the concept of blasphemy is recognized even dharmically? Yes. And there's a good reason for this. You're telling me that as a global minority, the exercise of free speech lands in the same manner on you. As a community that has seen two successive waves of massive colonization, you're telling me that when the other guy cracks a joke, being a global majority who's capable of summoning the ummah from the outside of this country to press into service his position inside the country, you're telling me that the joke will land in the same way as you. So when swastika is slandered and bandied in the world, do you understand the consequences of Bharatiya staying outside? Anybody who's lived in the United States or has relatives in the United States, they'll tell you, people who wear the bindi are referred to as what? Red dots. Red dots. This is not a joke. Please understand that as on date, this civilization is on the cusp of an existential challenge. And therefore, at this stage, you do not have the luxury of indulging in tolerance. Dare I say this? Tolerance will come when there is peace. Today, you're not at peace. And the worst part is, you're not at peace because of the traitors you're producing and less because of the people from outside. Now, therefore, the question would be, if the blasphemer, so to speak, comes from within the community, what's your position going to be? Indulge. करने दो. बच्चे हैं. क्या फर्क पड़ता है? These are instrumentalities and tools in the hands of the other. That must be realized. So I am not presenting a solution. I am simply challenging existing preconceived notions on blasphemy and basically putting out the context in which perhaps you must revisit these notions. Now let's come to the other two issues. So one, blasphemy, my position is very simple. 295A is unfortunately, and I use the word unfortunately, a necessity, because you do not have a response to the street veto of the other side today. And you're not sure that the state is strong enough, virile enough to protect you. And even if it does protect, its protection translates to condolence in 2 lakhs. There is no protection before. Therefore, the one thing that can torment the other side is the law. वो भी छोड़ दें. बचा क्या? You want to enter the boxing ring with both hands tied and a smashed jaw. This is as real as it gets. The one thing that these beheadings have effectively told us is that according to him, this is not an academic discussion. वो संवाद के लिए तैयार नहीं हो रहा है. He is not getting ready for a dialogue. He is getting ready for a battlefield. And it's for you to decide. As Winston Churchill said, while the Hindu sharpens his argument, the other side sharpens his sword. Let's fight the sword with tolerance. That's our civilizational decision. Welcome to your own funeral, not your party. On sedition. Now let's come to sedition. Why was sedition introduced? To go after Gokhale? To go after Tilak? No. No. When section 124A was introduced in the Indian Penal Code, was there a provision to charge people who were waging war against the state? Any law students here? It's a pop quiz. हाथ खड़े किए और नीचे गए. The moment I said it's a pop quiz. भैया क्या है? Okay. Section 121 of the Penal Code as it existed then was used for waging war against the state. So when you had a provision, so this was waging war against the queen or the king, depending on who was wearing the crown. So if you had a provision which was meant to prosecute people who were waging war against the king or the queen, why did you need a section 124A? What does the history say on this particular subject? So here's what happened. Read my second book for this. The first 2 chapters of the first section significantly cover this along with the debates. Because the misconception is that, oh, ये तो हमारे स्वतंत्रता संग्राम को clamp down करने के लिए. No, that's not the history. They were going after the Wahhabi movement in this country. They were going after the Wahhabi movement in this country. How many people know when did the Wahhabi movement even take place in this country? Please read it. Syed Ahmad Barelvi died on the 6th of May 1831 in a place which will immediately give you a recall value, in Balakot. He was killed by Ranjit Singh's son, Sher Singh. From then on, Balakot has become a training ground because it's a shrine for jihadis. No wonder we went after Balakot after Pulwama. Because that's where they are indoctrinated and prepared. That's the memory of that community. Respect it. That's the long memory of that community. 1831 though is even relatively recent. They have a longer memory, therefore they are clearer about what they want. We are forgetful. We suffer from amnesia of all sorts. So what happened was to continue this jihad against first the British Empire, or rather the Sikh Empire and then the British Empire. People were being mobilized from all over Bharat, and money and preachers were being routed and funneled from Patna. What was the previous name of Patna? नहीं, इन दोनों के बीच में इसका एक नाम था, Azimabad. Okay, it goes from there to NWF, Northwest Frontier. So the British realized इस preaching activity को कैसे रोकें, क्योंकि हमारे पास इसके लिए कोई provision नहीं है. Financial activity को कैसे रोकें, indoctrination को कैसे रोकें. Hence the or and or in the section. And therefore the catch-all provision of otherwise, because if you do something that is intended in this particular direction, which is not specifically provided for in the provision, I must still have an omnibus catch-all provision to come after you. And therefore the otherwise. That is how legal drafting happens. So when they did that, they decided to go after the activity thoroughly. Give the British man the courtesy of respect for being thorough. No wonder we are speaking in his language and wearing his clothes. He has done something right from his perspective. This was the thoroughness with which it was drafted. It is draconian for people who suffer, but जो राज कर रहा है उसके लिए तो ये draconian नहीं है. ये तो जरूरी है. उसने वही किया. So debates from 1863 right until 1913 will show this, that this was to go after the Wahhabi movement. Therefore, sedition as a provision is needed to go after all the activities that start from time T0 until bump हटे. क्योंकि बम्प हटने के लिए तो एक प्रोविजन है, यहां से बीच का जो रास्ता है उसको पकड़ना है. Therefore, sedition. I agree with Anand on a different aspect though. भाई अगर यही करना है, why do you have a provision in UAPA and in Penal Code IPC 124A? I'm with you. I am with you. You can't have two different provisions doing the same thing and going after the same thing. Makes no sense. I am with you. But sedition as a concept and the ability of the state to go after all of this must exist. That's the only way we will be safe. I agree that there is rife scope for abuse. So did the framers of the Constitution, not just the fathers, even the Pita and Mata of the Constitution, did they know what they were doing? Yes. Kulapati Munshi, K.T. Munshi, the one who is credited for Bharati Vidya Bhavan, specifically discussed this, saying, Indian courts shall interpret this provision in a manner which is consistent with existing jurisprudence. And by that time, that is by 1947, British courts had said criticism of the government is not sedition. By the way, British courts in Britain and their courts in India, both of them had said this. That's one of the reasons several of our leaders were let off the hook. So sedition, when it is interpreted today by any court, is always interpreted in the backdrop of this history. I agree that there are tremendous and horrendous exceptions, which is to say there is rampant scope for abuse. And there is a way of addressing it, to tighten the screws. There are many ways to do it. So the so-called Mothership England has also come out with practice directions कि किस situation में आप इसको employ करेंगे. Don't be trigger happy when it comes to sedition. I agree. And if someone is accused of sedition and his life is lost or his future is lost, what are the compensatory mechanisms? Think about that, no problem. But do bear in mind that you are a civilization under siege when you discuss this. You're not a United States that has a Canada on the top and the Mexico on the side and Atlantic Sea on both sides. You're not a Japan that is protected by United States. You're not an Israel which lives in the Middle East but still has the protection of the West. आपको बचाने के लिए कोई नहीं आएगा. You are on your own. So you might as well equip yourself for that loneliness. Therefore, my only humble request is whenever you discuss free speech, Samvidhan, and that word I hope is banned from public discourse, enshrined ko hatao. Every time someone talks of the Constitution, they have to use this word. It is enshrined in the Constitution. Pata bhi hai iska matlab kya hai? Don't use it. It makes no sense. Don't simply parrot these lines just because someone else is doing it. It doesn't make you look intelligent or cool. And certainly doesn't make you look legally savvy. Because we don't use these words in court. 100%. We don't even touch it with a barge pole. Nahi chuna hai bhai isko. Makes no sense. Enshrined means इसके लिए एक मंदिर बना दिया. क्या बनाया सबको पता है. ये मंदिर है या कुछ और है हमको पता है. So therefore I'm saying, have these discussions with some context of history. Imagine now on the question of I just have 5 more minutes, I'll just take 5 more minutes. On the question of how do you go after, blasphemy, or how do you interpret it, what are the defenses, truth and all that, there is one more thing. जब ये पूरा controversy चल रहा था नुपुर शर्मा का, Hindus were at pains to say ये लिंग नहीं है, ये form of energy है, ये वो है, ये है. लिंग को लिंग नहीं मान सकते हैं आप लोग? Why are you so ashamed of your own culture? Why is it that you choose to actually pray to the ling? Because it is a representation of Raudra, of masculinity, of potency. You want to say it's not? Okay, how many people have been to Pashupatinath in Nepal? Okay. It's a mature audience, hopefully. If you've got under 18, it's not my fault. You knew what you were getting into. So please take responsibility. Okay? Now, in Pashupatinath Mandir, apart from the Moolagra, so to speak, you go to the right. There is a specific Bhairav Roop there. people who want children are expected to do something there. Touch a particular organ and come out. You're worshipping the organ. It's surprising that Hindus are so easily ashamed of their own religion. Whereas he gets away literally with murder. Now when he was saying, so therefore, during this entire controversy, obviously the other side, that's exactly what provoked Nupur Sharma. That he made fun of it. And therefore she had to respond. So one of the factors that you consider in deciding blasphemy, so on and so forth, is this under duress, provocation, what? No, it's not as if she was waiting there to just shoot out this statement. नहीं था. ज्ञान वापिक के संदर्भ में ये डिस्कशन चल रहा था, किसी ने वहां से ये टिप्पणी और व्यंग के बाण चलाए, उसने जवाब दिया. Right? So therefore, to that extent, she was not actively looking for controversy. So that is one of the mitigating factors in deciding blasphemy. Is she responsible for blasphemy? Second, does the content of the statement have any truth in it or an element of truth in it? Which it is. I agree with Anand on that. Now, usually the other discussion that happens is, samajh lijiye, Krishna Leela, when it is read by a bhakta or the devout, is seen as a divine play. But the one who does not believe in it will make utter fun of it. When that fellow Neeraj in that movie with Salman Khan has this line, Krishna kare to ye leela hai, main karun to kuch aur hai, he says this. You know why we should have actually prosecuted that fellow for this? Because what is important is tone. Tone. कृष्ण लीला के बारे में जब बात होती है या भगवान के बारे में बात होती है, respect, because you're hurting our sentiments. That is the position. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying this is what the law says. Now, but then, question would be, Bhaiya, I don't even subscribe to your faith. Kahe ka respect? I don't subscribe to your faith at all. Plus, I wish to critique it because I feel either it's stupid or whatever it is. If that's the position of someone, I agree with Anand there. Otherwise, Charvaka should have been beheaded. Going by this logic. So, the concept or the discussion surrounding blasphemy is way more complex and requires a bit more of thought. For strategic reasons, I am saying retain the provision. Because आज आपके हाथ में उसके अलावा और कोई औजार नहीं है. So my position is not strictly academic. It is realistic. उसके पास तलवार है और मेरे पास कील है. कील तो है. जहां मारना है मारो. कील भी गया. So what will you do? जादू की झप्पी. My dear brother is Mahatma Gandhi's letter to Hitler. Hitler would have said, throw it in the dustbin. What a cloying nonsense this is. It's too sugary. I can't even handle this. It's like watching that movie Viva by the Barjatias. Unbelievable cloying nonsense. So therefore, bottom line, please get real. Hindus don't have the luxury of academic hair splitting. All of these discussions must be in the context of the beheadings. Thank you.